These two guys have Minnesota sports flowing in their veins. Mackie and Judd on SKOR North and SKORNorth.com.
He is Darren Doogie Wolfson from the 5 Eyewitness News Sports Department. It's a scoop session here on Minnesota Sports with Mackie and Judd. Gentlemen, there's some Viking stuff we can always get into, but the NBA lost its mind over the weekend. Just the craziest trade. People are trying to figure out what the Mavericks are doing. So let me ask you this to start with, Doogie. The trade deadline is a couple days away here in the NBA. We're trying to figure out if Tim Connolly is operating in the shadows. Is Julius Randle going to still be here on Friday? But like now that trade happened, Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis, nothing would surprise me anymore. So where are you at on the Julius Randle getting moved sliding scale here? What percentage chance do you think that he gets traded before Thursday? I think we may have
speechless
internet gremlins here.
Yeah, completely blown up. Internet grizzlies attacking. Are they attacking me or attacking you? Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Or am I invisible?
Well, I think we got you now.
What the heck is going on with the internet gremlins? Nice. Perfect. So, I'm not saying 0% chance, Phil, on Julius Randle. Clearly his name has come up. I just, going back to in this space a couple weeks, I just haven't heard any real steam, legit steam. So my money right now is on Randle being here on Friday. The groin strain certainly doesn't help. He's not going to be back this week. It's not a long-term type injury, but it's going to be some time. Now, I get it. If some team is acquiring him, it's with the thought that either you're keeping him long-term or you're very hopeful that he opts out of his deal this summer. So I get it from that standpoint, but I would think if anybody trades for him, they also want some sort of impact on the court at some point this year. When that will happen again, a little up in the air. By the way, they missed him greatly last night. So whatever you think of Julius Randle, to me, you have him last night. I think you beat the Kings. So we can dive into that a little bit more in a second. But they certainly are on the lookout. A high-ranking Wolves official told me on Monday, we are always looking for ways to improve. So they are making calls. Look at a team like New Orleans. I don't have New Orleans cap sheet in front of me, but New Orleans is looking to duck under the tax. Look at teams that maybe are out of the playoff picture that want to duck under a tax. Maybe you're at one apron, want to get under another apron. Look at some of those teams. Also, the Bulls did make a move on Monday on Torrey Craig with his playoff history, making some three-pointers. To me, the Wolves could use another shooter. Well, he would check that box. They could certainly use another ball handler / point guard. And I think they could use some rim protection depth. So Tim Connolly absolutely is on the lookout. There is an open roster spot. Remember, they made the move in January on PJ Dozier. Tim Connolly is now, 2 for 2? When you look at 2023 trade deadline, 2024 trade deadline, the D'Angelo Russell deal 2 trade deadlines ago. Last year, the Monte Morris trade. And so absolutely is working it. Matt Lloyd, others with the Wolves front office working it. I just don't know in this space on Tuesday at 10:15 a.m. Central if anything is on the cusp of happening.
So the Cat trade right before training camp actually started this. But let's talk about because we've talked about the brackets, right, and the aprons and blah, blah, blah. But let's talk about what is clearly an issue now for the entire league and certainly had an effect on the Lakers-Mavs trade. And that's the fact that the new CBA went into effect on July 1st. And I think we have a combination here of it's punitive, and teams are also realizing now, as it plays out in real time, what those punitive situations are. So how much are we potentially going to see moves made? I don't think the Luka trade probably happens without the CBA firing back on the 1st of July. I think it becomes probably a little bit more of a stretch. How much are we potentially looking at the fact that the Wolves Cat trade actually started the snowball going downhill on what could be some more really surprising trades, not so much because of players, but because of financial circumstances.
Well, I mean, possibly. Although if Mark Cuban was still the Mavericks majority owner, Judd, I promise you,
it doesn't.
Luka Doncic is still a Dallas Maverick,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like,
Agreed.
I get it. Somewhere down the road, remember, the Cat trade did not need to happen in that moment. They could have waited. Eventually, yes, completely understand. Removing one of the big contracts, but Cat was always the most logical. In this sense, like, trust me, I know some people down in Dallas. Nico Harrison freaking loves Anthony Davis.
Yeah.
Like, he is convinced. Now, I could make a case. My buddy Sean Sweeney coordinates the Mavericks defense, so I'm a little bit biased, but the Mavericks defense was already pretty good. Not elite, not great, but pretty darn good. Mm-hmm. They didn't need to do this, but Nico Harrison, going back to his Nike days, connection with AD, like, this was all about acquiring Anthony Davis. The idea really, Judd, was with the CBA that it was to limit movement, that they didn't want these super teams to be made. Now, hey, the idea was they don't want these teams to be able to pay, 3 guys max contracts. But the idea in many ways was to limit player movement. Now, inevitably, there is going to be player movement based on how much money you can allocate to certain guys. But I'm just telling you, it's not like Dallas had to move Luka now. It's not like Cat had to be moved in late September. But it is a fascinating tentacle to all of this. And we now know, once Luka Doncic gets moved, like, literally, there is no such thing as reckless speculation. It's literally the job of general managers.
It's over.
Yes, they toss out many ideas. Most trades talked about never happen, but they were talked about. So for us, for others, there is no such thing. It's a great sounder, but trust me, all speculation is legit speculation.
No, it's clickbait.
Reckless speculation.
Clickbait. Clickbait. Yeah, totally agree. Doogs, okay, on that note.
Put it this way. This front office is much like the Gerson Rosas front office. Like, I was told, sure, you at least inquire about De'Aaron Fox. I don't know the gymnastics on how exactly, like, what legitimately needed to happen. It would have been a lot. It was doable, but it wasn't easy. But, like, they inquired on De'Aaron Fox. If I had to wager, okay, if you want to put this under the reckless speculation umbrella, fine. But if I had to wager, they've at least inquired with the Phoenix Suns about Kevin Durant. It's not an easy trade to make, especially with Phoenix being in the second apron. But I'm just saying, like, it's what this front office does. There's nothing wrong with that. They like to have their finger on the pulse of what's going on around the league. Now, I'm not quite sure anybody in the Wolves front office had any inkling late on Saturday that Luka Doncic was about to be traded, but they make many, many calls, many, many inquiries.
I'm going to ask an uncomfortable question here. Dallas Mavericks fans are pissed. It's going to be so interesting because they have not played a home game yet. They got smoked by like 50 points with a bunch of backups the day after the trade or the night of the trade. But they just lost, those fans just lost a player that they thought was going to be there for 10 more years, a player that they have become attached to for 5 years. It's like you said, it's a shockwave trade that now makes anything possible in a league where a lot of things were already possible with trades. Where are the Timberwolves at with Anthony Edwards in that relationship? Everything seems, I mean, he definitely has had some moments this year where he seems a little more irked, a little more annoyed. They did trade one of his closest friends on the team in Carl. They would ride into the arena together, and, he definitely got along really well with Carl. But they haven't performed as well as they did last year. There's all these players being thrown around. The Lakers are going to be looking for a long-term running mate for Luka. The Heat are always sniffing around looking for the next guy to lead their franchise. So there are some shark franchises lurking in the water looking to pull. And by the way, Bucks fans have had to deal with this with Giannis for years. He's still in Milwaukee. So it doesn't have to be that every star goes to a bigger market or a different market. But where do you think the Anthony Edwards Timberwolves relationship and timeline is right now?
It is pretty good. Chris Hines, developmental coach, one of his guys, they have a close relationship. He still has enough close friends in that locker room. And so I would tell you right now, it's pretty darn solid. I will also tell you, Anthony Edwards, my sense is, has a really good relationship with Alex Rodriguez. So as we are now days away from an arbitration, a binding arbitration decision, Rodriguez, Laurie v. Glen Taylor. If Glen Taylor prevails, how might that change things? But like right in this moment, you think about his agent, Joe Branch. Joe used to be in the Wolves front office. Joe still has many good relationships here. Like rock solid. Like in this moment, Phil, absolutely rock solid.
Okay.
Nothing I would worry about in this moment if I were a Wolves fan. But I'm just saying, it is interesting to me that in a short time, well, maybe a couple years now, but Ant and A-Rod have developed a nice bond. So what if A-Rod is no longer part of the Wolves organization after this arbitration decision? Just something to think about.
It is.
Well, if you explore that space, Dukes, Tim Connolly, the opt-out. Like if Glenn gets the team, does that still impact Conley? Is Tim now comfortable enough with Glenn as his boss? Like this is going to have, it's probably not going to have certainly major ramifications for the 2024-25 season, Dukes, but beyond it, you're going to have a lot. If Glenn keeps the team, I got a lot of questions, including does Conley at that point opt out? And I mean, heck, you know what? In Conley's case too, he could say like, well, that cat trade didn't work out so great. Team's not where I thought I would have them positioned. And by the way, now I can opt out. So like you're exploring a reckless speculation space that is really, really intriguing if Glen Taylor retains this franchise.
Well, if Glen Taylor retains the franchise, yes, Judd, there are many questions, but yeah, Tim Connolly's future would be just about atop the list of those many questions. New arena potentially, heck, A-Rod and Laurie then no longer remaining as limited partners, selling their shares, what that would look like. So yeah, many, many questions to answer if Glen Taylor retains majority ownership. I will tell you, I don't sense like Ant would ask out if Tim Connolly leaves. Now, Tim Connolly, he's done enough, right? Like he would land another president of operations job. Like if he opts out, he would know in the moment, I know where I am going, right? But like I don't sense like if you're wondering just on the piggybacking of the Ant inquiry just now, like I don't think Ant would say, okay, Tim Connolly gone, get me the heck out of here.
Right.
But I'm telling you, it would be interesting to think about if A-Rod is no longer part of the Wolves organization.
And we're going to know soon, right? We're going to know, they're going to get an email like next week and then it goes to the NBA Board of Governors.
I mean, it might even be before next week. So I'm looking at the calendar. So it was a Friday. Yeah, it was January 10th, a Friday, that lawyers for both sides were summoned to downtown Minneapolis, answer some final questions from the 3-person arbitration panel. I was led to believe 30 days later or within 30 days. So January 10th, okay, we are looking at like somewhere in the ballpark of February 10th. But now as we sit here on February 4th, sure, like we could get some news here at any moment. Trust me. I'm plenty on standby. Like, it's not like it's back of my mind. It's pretty front of my mind, knowing a decision is coming pretty fast.
I have a future-looking Timberwolves question for you here, too, because if they trade Julius Randle this week, it would not, unless there's some bigger deal brewing that also involves, like, Jaden McDaniels, $25 million or something, but the idea would be to trade him for expiring contracts so that you clear that money off the books, get out of the second apron. You wouldn't necessarily be flipping Julius Randle for another piece that you use for the future. If you did, you'd then have to say goodbye for sure to Nickeil Alexander-Walker, maybe even to Naz Reid to stay under the second apron where it becomes impossible to just make moves. So my question to you is, who belongs in this nucleus the next 3 years? Anthony Edwards, Dante DiVincenzo for sure. I think Naz Reid does, but again, it's kind of up to him because he is an unrestricted free agent if he declines his player option, which he will. Jaden McDaniels has played, and again, they needed offense last night. He poured in some buckets last night. He's actually played at a really high level the last month, probably the best month that he's played. But who do you think makes up this nucleus in 2025, 26, and then beyond?
I mean, it's a fascinating question. They still lack, Phil, a number 2. Like, I understood in the moment the Cat trade, but it's clear as day. Like, he could have been the number 2, at least for this year, run this thing back this year, then reevaluate. They still don't have a number 2. I love Naz Reid. I have a man crush on him, like a lot of people. He's not a number 2. So who is that number 2? Who is, to use the cliche, that Robin to Ant being Batman? I don't know who that is. But yes, on Naz, the idea all along when you moved Cat was you are going to pay Naz a ton of money, like double what he's making now, like minimum $30 million a year. I can roll with Jaden McDaniels. I think it's a reasonable number. Heck, the last month, he has played his best basketball, in my mind, in a Wolves uniform. The defense is always going to be elite. Now, hey, it's a team. The defense last night stunk, right? So there are lulls, but I can still live with the Jaden McDaniels contract because to me, he's a top 10 on-ball defender in the league. DiVincenzo, sure. Outside of that, Phil, I don't know. Dillingham, okay. Terrence Shannon, I still think he can be a rotation guy. Heck, I would rip up the two-way contract Jalen Clark has, sign him to one of those Naz Reid, 4-year, 3 years non-guaranteed type deals. I want Jalen Clark here, but he's like an 8th, 9th man, right? He's not a starter on a championship level team. So there's still work to be done. It's a fascinating question, though. It really is. I mean, Julius Randle is not one of those answers. He just isn't, although I'm telling you, I think they have missed him the last couple games. They absolutely have missed him. They will miss him the rest of this week. But Randle is not an answer to that question. So I don't know. It's a good question. It really is because there's still more work to be done, clearly, right? They need to find that number 2. Who is that number 2? How do you acquire that number 2? I don't know how they get there.
When the Cat trade was made, Dukes, do we think that Conley foresaw that Julius would be that guy and stay here? Or was this always done with, at least from the Julius standpoint aspect of the trade, was this always a wait and see, and what has transpired here doesn't really shock the Wolves internally?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a whole lot of shock. I remember in the moment, late September, early October, going back and forth with a number of people that did tell me, let's see. But we also found out in that moment, remember in that moment, it was like, okay, how many days do they need to wait until they could trade Julius Randle? I forget if it was 60 or 90. Clearly, we're past the 60 or 90, so it doesn't matter. But in that moment of October 1st, we were like, okay, how many days do the Wolves need to wait until they can trade Julius Randle? You know why we brought that up? Because they were thinking about that possibility. This trade was about that Pistons pick, was about Dante DiVincenzo, about re-signing Naz Reid. Flexibility, longer term. It wasn't about Julius Randle, but Chris Finch, with his history with Julius in New Orleans, was pro, hey, let me see if I can make this work. They were open-minded to it working. So, a little bit of a question mark, right? But this was never about Julius Randle long term. It just was not. It was about DiVincenzo, that pick. By the way, if they want to move Randle, Phil, they could. But do you want to attach that Pistons pick? That Pistons pick right now is what, pick 15 or pick 16 this year? That is a really good pick. This is a good draft. I don't think you want to move a top 20 pick this year. Now, maybe
not
the Pistons will ultimately make the playoffs. Maybe that pick doesn't convey this year, but it certainly looks like it will convey in the next few years, 26 or 27, that the Pistons are building something that should be able to sustain for a bit, make the postseason. I'm not attaching that pick to move Julius Randle. I'm okay. Call me nuts. I'm okay if the end game, if I'm keeping that Pistons pick, if you lose Nickeil Alexander-Walker, so be it. Now, hey, to me, he was their best player the first couple months. He couldn't make a shot last night. He has tailed off. But I am a big Nickeil Alexander-Walker fan. But it's called roster management. You can't keep everyone. So to me, if you lose Nickeil, but you get to keep that Pistons pick, so be it.
Yeah, the Nikhil thing, he is such a glue player, and his energy, and when he is making shots, he's capable. I mean, he did it a couple times back-to-back games last week, or he's knocking down five in a game. But his skill set, it's a 3-and-D skill set. And he's not like a 6'9", 6'10" unicorn. So it sucks to say this, but if you had to get really tight with certain parts of your roster to get below the second apron, and it came down to it, like if I had to choose between Nikhil or Nas as part of this nucleus for the next 3 to 5 years, I'm choosing Nas.
Absolutely.
And then hoping that one of the other young Jalen Clark can kind of grow into that Nikhil Alexander-Walker role.
Or Terrence Shannon Jr. Yes. I mean,
yep.
I promise you, Phil, everyone, like, I can't tell you I've asked everyone with the Wolves, but like, I firmly believe it would be universal. Nas Reed over Nikhil Alexander-Walker. I don't even think that's much of a debate.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll get to some more scoopage here, but MSP Plumbing here. I know who we're trading for if you got plumbing issues. MSP Plumbing and Heating, Judd.
Absolutely true, because right now, 4 degrees outside. That's right. The cold is back, which means that if your furnace starts to cough and wheeze, there is no worse feeling than that, because now you're saying my house is going to be freezing cold, and my fine folks, my fine friends at MSP Plumbing, Heating and Air are going to tell you that does not need to be the case. For over a century now, families have relied upon them for all their plumbing, drains, heating, and cooling needs. 100% family-owned and operated business. MSP is committed to taking care of your family and making sure that your house is safe and warm. In fact, right now, for this month, book a $49 furnace tune-up, and you'll be entered to win a free furnace. You must book the tune-up in the month of February to be entered to win. It's this simple. Give them a call, 651-615-4292, or check out their website, callmsp.com, callmsp.com.
Okay, last night we busted out the old pizza cooker and threw a Pep's Legit pepperoni in, and it was fantastic. This is some of the best pizza you're going to find. Go to that frozen section of your grocery store. Stone-baked, cracker-thin crust, that throwback pizza parlor vibe with this pizza. We cut it into squares once again, like good Minnesotans. Signature spice topping. Legit pizzas are the real deal. I'm telling you, this is, as a guy who has sampled some frozen pizzas in his day, Pep's Legit Pizza lives up to the name Legit. Find Legit pizzas at a store near you and have an authentic at-home pizza parlor experience. Okay, Doogs. The rest of your scoop bag here. Let's actually start Vikings. So the Vikings have about 2 weeks, a little less than 2 weeks, around 2 weeks, I guess, to figure out. Well, they don't have to franchise Darnold on the first day, but the window opens up in a couple weeks here. We've seen a lot of Darnold. Some of the national guys, like Vikings, are still leaning toward keeping him. That seems like a narrative that's going to flip-flop like the Cousins one did last year. But today, we finally had some J.J. McCarthy news. It seems like maybe J.J.'s agent is trying to put some good vibes out. He said the report is J.J. McCarthy is ahead of schedule and can basically do everything right now on a football field with that knee that you would need to do. So he's ahead of schedule is the news that came out today.
Which is fantastic. I remember the day of KOC's season-ending news conference, texting with somebody close to JJ, somebody that's known JJ for a really long time. He said, yeah, JJ is going to be ready to go come September. Now, adding some weight, there's still some hurdles to clear. But yes, all signs point to JJ being in a really good spot. Have you seen the latest odds on Sam Darnold's next team? Let me see if I can find them, see if I can multitask here.
I think I saw Steelers and Raiders. Steelers and Raiders, right?
It is, although it was from bookies.com, oddsmaker Adam Thompson. Let me see if I can find the exact email, and of course I can't, but your betting favorite, a return to the Vikings at plus 250.
Yeah.
Then it was the Raiders,
it's being floated.
The Steelers. Here's where I would put my money. I get it. To me, it's not the Vikings. It absolutely could be the Raiders or the Steelers. But the Rams at plus 1,200. I just don't know if we're talking enough about what is going to take place with the Rams. Is Matthew Stafford for sure back with the Rams? I'm just saying, if I'm trying to make a little bit of money, if I'm laying $10 or $20, I'm going with the plus 1,200 over the plus 350 of the Raiders. Certainly not betting the Vikings, but I get it. The steam in Mobile from the Senior Bowl was that the Vikings absolutely are contemplating return of Sam Darnold, right? That was the national steam. So then these odds makers react to that national steam. Judd, I continue to think it's all part of the game. The leverage that the Vikings need to maintain to create, in their minds, hopefully a trade market. I still can't wrap my arms around Sam Darnold being back with the Vikings.
It's fake steam. It's completely fake. I think what they do is they take the reporting, right? And then they put the odds on the Vikings because it's credible people. And then after that, they use common sense. The Rams one is interesting. Let's talk about that just a little bit here. So Stafford has said he wants to play. His contract for 2025 needs to be, obviously, because of the enormous cap hit, redone. This reminds me, guys, of and Phil and I did a bunch of episodes back in the old days on this, on the radio show. This reminds me of Drew Brees with the Saints. And it's like, will Drew Brees leave the Saints? And of course, because we dealt in reckless speculation, we all said, well, let's talk about it. And could the Vikings get him? And at the end of the day, he was going nowhere. So it's my humble opinion that probably in the case of Stafford, he's going to either retire, which I don't think he's going to do, or stay there with the Rams. But that being said, I don't disagree. I don't think that you can completely dismiss this. I do think that Darnold is going to find that he has a market, though, to start immediately. And with Stafford saying he's coming back, I don't think it's with the Rams. But that's just my sussing out of the situation.
Wow.
Which is fair. I mean, I get it. Raiders, Steelers. I guess maybe the Giants, but Raiders, Steelers. I understand it. Raiders. If Russell Wilson reunites with Pete Carroll in Vegas, okay, then Pittsburgh. But if Pete Carroll wants to aim higher, in my mind, than Russell Wilson, then you aim for Sam Darnold. There is going to be a market. The Vikings have too many holes. It's the same theme. The Vikings have too many holes.
It's Kirk Cousins.
Fill.
The same
you
thing.
Don't invest $35 to $40-something million, eat up all that cap space. Now, I get it. There is a scenario where you sign Sam Darnold to a longer-term deal where the cap number in 2025 is relatively low. I understand that. I'm just telling you, for the life of me, I can't wrap my brain around that idea.
Yeah. Okay, what about we actually included these two men in our 2.0 offseason blueprint episode on Purple Daily today. We actually found a way to bring in Cooper Kupp either after he's cut by the Rams or maybe you trade him like a day 3 draft pick or something. But you bring in Cooper Kupp, age 31, 32, and you trade Jordan Addison to a weapons-desperate team like the Jaguars or somebody. Myles Garrett, you got to give up at least a first-round pick. You're pretty loaded at edge. I mean, he's one of the best edge rushers in recent NFL history. But Cooper Kupp seems to make a little sense because KOC obviously loves him from his time with the Rams. And if they saw an opportunity to trade Jordan Addison while the value was high, a guy that they aren't giving an extension to in the next couple of years, I don't know. What do you think of those two guys floating out there now?
Well, on Kupp, yes, it's not just KOC. There are other people in Egan who think the world of Cooper Kupp. Think about that Rams 2021 staff. Think about how good Cooper Kupp was in 2021. Perhaps the best wide receiver season in NFL history. I don't think that's hyperbole. Go back and look at Kupp's numbers in 2021. Now, I get it. 4 years later, he's not the same player. And I think the Rams would have to cut him or eat a ton of money. The Vikings are not absorbing a big Cooper Kupp number, but interest? Sure. Now, does he want to stay on the West Coast? Heck, does he want to stay in LA? Would the Chargers make some sense? Would the Raiders make some sense? But sure, the Vikings being fans of Cooper Kupp? Absolutely. Yes. Myles Garrett, I don't know on that one, Phil. The Browns would have to eat so much money, dead cap hit, if they trade him before June 1st. So if the idea is to accumulate 2025 draft picks, I don't know. That's a tricky one. Now, hey, where the Vikings probably need to be careful, if you're the Browns, you're not trading Garrett to an AFC team, so you're moving him to an NFC team. Yes. Well, is that the Detroit Lions? The Lions make a lot of sense to me for Myles Garrett. So if you're the Vikings, you might need to be a little careful. We know that Kwesi, Andrew Berry, incredibly close. So I think if you're Kwesi, you at least have the conversation. But I just don't know logically how you make that happen. Cooper Kupp makes a bit more sense to me than Myles Garrett.
And if Coop gets cut too,
Exactly. Yes.
that becomes a very attractive thing. And the one thing I will say is he
By
might want.
the way, I have a good relationship with his agent. Very good relationship with Cooper Kupp's agent. Yeah.
And he might want to stay out west, but at the end of the day, he would be stepping into an offense that he basically knows backwards and forwards, which has to be attractive. And despite the fact that the Vikings play in the Midwest, he'd be stepping into basically a dome team. So like there's a lot of things to like here. And I think if Cooper Kupp could stay healthy and you had him and Jefferson running those routes, I think it would be a nightmare because you wouldn't know who's doing what when. So like to me, this makes a ton of sense. The Garrett thing that I brought up to Phil and Dex on the Blueprint episode that we did a PD, Dukes, is this too. He is a 4-3 edge rusher. The Vikings play a 3-4. I got to think that he's at a point in his life and career where he doesn't have an interest in altering, exactly where his hand is. So I don't see that. It's fun to talk about, but the Kupp one, I think, makes just so much sense potentially for the Vikings and for Kupp.
Did we lose Dukes?
I think we may have lost Doogie's internet feed again, but we are winding down the scoop session here because we're like 30 minutes in. So yeah, he's still frozen down there too.
It was good while it lasted.
It was.
It got off to a bad start.
Yeah.
He came back strong and then faded. That's okay though.
That's right. We'll say goodbye to Dukes. A great half-hour scoop session, and we'll pick up anything that we left in the bag on Thursday. Reckless Speculation Thursday here. Darren Doogie Wilson from the 5 Eyewitness News Sports Department. This is Minnesota Sports with Mackey and Judd.